bona fides?
bona fides.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Not only does his family own 2 Priuses, but he owns countless energy-efficient appliances. Craig's green is hollow, well-deserved. It is our great honor to have him enlighten us on the Prius effect. Please welcome Craig. Thank you, Craig.
I get up in the morning, I get into my Prius, and I hypermile my way into work. If this SUV gets behind me, starts tailgating me, I just look in my rearview mirror and say, "Hey baby, I'm driving a Prius." I get to work. I cruise into my hybrid, my special hybrid parking space, and I wave to my colleagues. My green halo is just shining. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, I am an example of conspicuous conservation. Now, you've heard of conspicuous consumption. This was a theory developed in the late 19th century by Thorstein Veblen when he observed in the nouveau riche of the time that it's not just enough to be wealthy and powerful. You had to have the evidence of wealth and power. If you got it, flaunt it. Well, 2 young Berkeley economists have established the theory of conspicuous conservation. They wondered, how much is a consumer willing to spend to establish his or her environmental bona fides? It's nice to help the planet, but it's really nice to be seen helping the planet. So they called this the Prius effect. They set out to test it. They saw in Berkeley that there are a lot of Priuses, but not so much other hybrid cars like Honda Civics that had the same, that were similarly hybrids, but didn't have that distinct styling of the Prius. So the Prius drivers would say, well, we like it because of the fuel efficiency, but they wondered if it was because of the signaling that the Prius drivers had. They were signaling their green awareness, their green halo. And the signaling theory is an economic theory. It's well established. It's what we do to present our best face. And it's very important to businesses because they want to understand how they can market to consumers. So in their test, to test their Prius effect, they put forth the hypothesis that Priuses are popular because of their styling. If a Prius looked like a Camry, it would not be as popular. So to test this, they took as their control car the Honda Civic hybrid, which does not have a distinct design. And they wondered that if your neighbors had a green awareness, or if your neighbors were environmentally aware, does the Prius effect, or does the effect of your signaling have more value in that community than it would in other communities? For example, in Berkeley, would a Prius have more value in terms of its signaling than, say, in Crawford, Texas? So to test this, they took the Honda Civic as its control, and they picked 2 states. They picked Colorado and Washington to test this theory. And what they did was they took voting records and they determined the green zip codes and the brown zip codes. The green zip codes, of course, were the Democrats. The brown zip codes were the Republicans. And they found that the green zip codes were crawling with Priuses. Not so much the Honda Civics. In fact, in some of the green zip codes, the Honda Civics actually went down. So they determined, based on this, that it was the Prius's distinct styling that made it so popular in this area. And they went further to put a value on this Prius effect. They had records that showed the response of consumers to price. And they were able to trace a demand curve that put what they called a willingness to pay on the Prius. And in Colorado, the willingness to pay was between $1,000 and $3,000. In Washington, the willingness to pay was between $300 and $1,400. Now, what this willingness to pay is, it's not that the Prius drivers actually paid this amount. Rather, it's the amount that this green halo had, what the value of this green halo had to the consumers. That's their willingness to pay. And there are other examples of this conspicuous conservation that they didn't study, these two economists. They didn't study, but they, for example, in solar panels on houses, some homeowners will actually choose the shadier side of the house to put these solar panels on if it's the side that is facing the street, so that their neighbors can see that they have solar panels. They know full well that this is inefficient. They would get better power on the other side, but they choose irrationally to put their solar panels on the shady side. Conspicuous conservation. So assuming that these two economists, the Sextons, Allison and Steve Sexton, are correct, what can we say about this? Well, first, conspicuous consumption is wasteful. It's not in the public good. Conspicuous conservation, even though we laugh and we think it's perhaps a little silly, there is some public good to this. In fact, it allows the individual to take the initiative to be greener, instead of having the government step in and enforce some environmental regulation. However, as we talked about, it is somewhat inefficient. Maybe there's a car that is more fuel efficient than the Prius, but the consumer will choose the Prius over that because of its distinctive style, its signaling. So it's really not the optimal choice. It's inefficient. It's irrational. So what can public policy do? What can the government do? Well, they can increase the incentives for less conspicuous forms of conservation, for energy efficient appliances, for insulation in the roof, to balance the conspicuous conservation and the less conspicuous conservation, to get more of a balanced mix. But in the meantime, I will go to the farmer's market every Sunday in my Prius and signal my conspicuous conservation.